Ellos van a estar hablando del plan de manejo de agua de tormentas para la Cuenca de Santurce.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por recibirnos. In English, my name is Jacob Wilson, Master of City and Regional Planning student at Georgia Tech. Today, I'm pleased to present alongside my fellow students, Lane Ellingson, Emran Spura, Cole Bearden. Sorry, Emran, if I mispronounced your last name. And to present about the ongoing water crisis in the neighborhood of Condado, the city of San Juan, and Puerto Rico. Our project is not directly focused on transportation, but as Dr. Fuentes made clear in his presentation, these systems are still very interrelated in their resilience, and I hope that through our presentation, everyone here can appreciate the connection and importance of water delivery and planning to transportation. So today we're going to present our preliminary overview of our project thus far, the three components that will start with a water crisis description, going on to a diagnosis and hypothesis for the cause of that crisis, finally to recommendations for addressing the crisis. And I'll now give the microphone to everyone to start our presentation with a description of water.
For our description of the water crisis, we found that there was four main components that were contributing to the issues around water in Condado. And those were water quality, water access, transparency and trust, and then natural disasters. While we'll talk about the three first ones, we won't be talking about natural disasters, but we do want to recognize that those disasters do exacerbate the issues of water. And they are a given, they are an aspect that both the community and both the government officials and water authorities will need to address in any solutions or proposals that they do offer. So the first aspect of this water crisis is the water quality. And in 2015, 99.5% of Puerto Rico's population was served water that violated the Safe Drinking Water Act. And this was something that was reflected in some of our discussions with community members who would mention that, especially in moments of water outages or right after water outages, they would be worried about the water quality that they were receiving. And this is in part a consequence of the industrial legacy in Puerto Rico, where, as you can see in this image, there are many Superfund sites, some of which are related to groundwater sites that do make the water quality issue a little bit more pertinent. And then also due to outdated infrastructure that allows for a mixture of drinking water and sewage water, especially in moments after natural disasters and flooding, which can push residents to be worried or concerned with the quality of water that they are consuming. The second component of this water crisis is water access. So more than 50% of the so processed water is lost due to poor infrastructure or illegal capture. And this was reflected in the amount of outages that residents were seeing in Condado and in Santurce. So right here we have a graph that was made by one of the residents in that area, Ana Iglesian, and this was done through resident contributions. And as you guys can see, that this represents the days without water, without light, and without water and light in 2026. You guys can see in February that 22 out of the 28 days were without water, which is a very significant amount. And as of now, there has been 10 days without water in March. So this is an issue that residents have to face consistently, where they are unsure of when or when not they will be able to access drinking water or water for other uses in their households. And this leads to the third component of the water crisis, an issue of transparency and trust. Because there's this irregularities in the access to water and quality for the residents of Condado, there is this lack of trust between the community and these water officials. And this has led to some concerns of residents that have been demonstrated in a recent march, in a recent protest on February 26th, so the Marcha por el Derecho al Agua. And this protest and march was really to bring attention to the inconsistency in water services that the residents we're facing, and to ask for the water officials to give more transparency in when or when not they would have access to water, when there would be interruptions, and how they could manage those interruptions, especially if they don't have the services or resources to do so themselves. And then this is also exacerbated by the fact that there are many different government and non-state actors that are involved in the management of water. There's a lot of crossover who manages both stormwater and drinking water. And this makes it hard for residents to know who to go to when they do have an issue. So this is part of our report, trying to bring a little bit more clarity to who's responsible for which part of the system, and to ensure that there's a good communication and a good trust system between both the residents and these federal, Commonwealth, and non-state actors.
The next part of our project was to do desk research and then field work here in Puerto Rico, interviewing local community leaders and officials from AAA to try and understand better the situation on the ground here in Puerto Rico. And so as part of that, we kind of coalesced around two primary hypotheses, which we're referring to as institutional fragmentation and bureaucratic capacity. We'll explain what both of these are in more detail. But institutional fragmentation refers to kind of the overlap of responsibilities and the lack of communication interagency that creates issues for organizations working on the ground to try and plan projects, for example. Bureaucratic capacity refers specifically to issues around funding and budgetary constraints, both from sources and imposed within the structures of the agencies, as well as what we've identified for interviews around personnel shortages and the lack of ability to respond in moments of crisis. So starting with institutional fragmentation, the underside of the street is very complicated. Here in Puerto Rico, we have the clean water, the potable water services that are provided by AAA, the municipal separate stormwater systems, which are administered by the Municipio de San Juan. And then you have the pumping, the pumping infrastructure that's operated by the Departamento de Recursos Ambientales. And then, of course, above the ground, you have your power infrastructure that's operated by Luma. And so all of this together creates a complicated system where if you're attempting to do a project that involves any of this, you have to cooperate and communicate with each of these agencies independently. And there's not a lot of interagency communication within them, creating this fragmented structure that delays processes. And we specifically, we went and talked to Enlace Canyo Martin Peña, and this group told us about a project where they were working on creating a boardwalk along the edge of the Canyo Martin Peña. And they were describing to us that they had an issue where they wanted to create all of the sewer, potable water, and stormwater infrastructure, but they were having a really tough time getting all of the organizations together, all of the agencies together to break ground in the street at the same time. That created an unfeasible timeline. I think it had delayed the project by several years. And so it created this situation where they were unable to create, or they have thus far been unable to begin working on this project because they weren't able to coordinate with all of the agencies. As part of our research, we wanted to compare it to an example from where we're from in Atlanta and Georgia. And so Atlanta is part of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District, which functions in a similar way to where there are local municipal utilities. For example, we don't have a similar version of AAA, but there are local utilities that provide water, that manage stormwater. But all of it is united under one regional planning apparatus that sets the policy and creates a single goal from which all of the municipal agencies are able to operate. So it provides a forum for communication between them when projects are happening. And so we view this as like a comparison to how the system is here in Puerto Rico versus what we operate under in Atlanta. Moving on to bureaucratic capacity, what we've seen both in our desk research and in our interviews is that there is a lot of money and funding available from the federal government through FEMA, but there is at times a difficulty in dispersing it through the traditional mechanisms. This is a budget breakdown from AAA from last year that shows that they left about $250 million on the table because they were just not able to actualize projects. we kind of anecdotally experienced this as well while we were doing interviews and walking around experiencing Puerto Rican snow this week. We found that there were a lot of instances where individual businesses or locals in the community would go out to try and unclog drains on their own because they knew the timeline would be more efficient for them to do so than to wait for capacity to come from one of the agencies itself.
So we do want to highlight that there will be a significant portion of our report that's dedicated to, just get on your head so I can gesture and stuff. An actual attempt at infrastructure mapping, because we believe that since we're suggesting that this infrastructure is made fragile due to organizational reasons, we also want to complement that with like understanding what is its natural fragility. And to do so, like we mentioned, we're not doing a rigorous analysis of how natural disasters or natural hazards might impact the fragility of these systems, instead of approaching it from an organizational and a systemic background. We do want to complement that organizational analysis with a understanding of what are the major threats to these systems outside of the capacity to organize and sustain them. So part of this will be a mapping project of current AAA-owned infrastructure throughout San Juan. This is unfortunately outdated. This is data that was collected during 2015. We are working with AAA to see if there's any more recent data that we can use to analyze the fragility of certain infrastructure, specifically critical infrastructure throughout San Juan. For instance, during one of our trips here, we were able to visit a pump station in this area, and in working with one of the engineers that managed that pump station, we learned that this pump station, were it to fail, it would actually cause significant impediments to critical evacuation routes in the region. So understanding the relation of this infrastructure, its potentially degraded capacity to maintenance, but also its degraded capacity to environmental hazards, will be important in understanding the ultimately what is the resilience of this system, and how are the organizations in charge of maintaining it trying to maintain its resilience. So I have not, put it strongly enough that this is a preliminary report. We collected some incredible background from residents, water access experts on the island since our week here. So we will hopefully be including that in our final report. But as it stands, we do have some general policy recommendations that we have been drifting towards, based both on our research and our interviews with residents and water experts while we were here. The first of these recommendations, which Lane already hinted at, is the idea of an integrated regional water resource planning apparatus. Since 2013, the EPA has been pushing a integrated water systems management approach. This is one where sewer and wastewater systems are essentially combined and assessed as a whole. This helps overall because not only does it reduce costs, if you're seeing these as a system that is approaching the same problems, you are able to invest in them similarly, as opposed to trying to have investments or organizations that maintain one system and then have an entirely separate organization that is doing its own investments to maintain another system. So not only does this reduce costs overall, it also mirrors the very natural cycle of water and how its integration could be complemented by a similarly integrated system. So next. Our other recommendation would be something that we also found when studying some of the other integrated water resource plans. And this would be an ongoing, essentially, advisory council of important stakeholders within the watershed. So this map shows the potential watershed locations, or the current watershed locations near and around San Juan, where we would suggest that essentially a water advisory council is put together that would be composed of water professionals, business leaders, environmental advocates, and interested community leaders that might be in the vicinity that want to know that their voice is being heard when it comes to water access and quality issues. Something that's important about this is that it not only gives an opportunity for the community to become engaged in the quality of their water, but it also provides an important avenue for representation. When somebody has an issue with their water access, if, like Imran's mentioned, they've gone without water for 22 days in February, they know somebody they can go to appropriately understand what steps are being taken to resolve that crisis. If they're seeing stormwater pull up in their streets and that is limiting their capacity to move around their communities. They will have somebody that they can go to that they know that will represent their interests and at least be able to provide some idea of what is being done to resolve these problems. So like I said, these are only potential recommendations. We're likely going to augment these with the information that we were able to gather on the island. But with those recommendations, we're done. Thank you very much for your time.